Nothing is dead. Nothing is ever dead. Nothing has ever been dead. I don't think any specific channel exists on its own. I mean, they do. And we've seen cold email work with no support. We've seen cold calls work, like we've seen LinkedIn work, all on their own islands. But I think they work best when you can complement them. But we were finding a lot of times, oh yeah, I have that problem. We were never actually aware that we were shopping around for that. That would actually be really valuable. We still haven't solved that problem. So like, oh, okay. Turns out companies don't communicate well internally. Shocker, I know. Why are they taking that cold call? There's probably a reason as to why they're more comfortable on the phone. Same thing with email. People reply in different ways through different modalities for different reasons. So if you can figure out the why to that channel, like that's very, very powerful. We're going to role play every day and you're going to get better every day. And we're going to celebrate that. And then we're going to find a way to get you on the phones. And then we're going to find a way to create an environment where you've got some low hanging fruit. We're not going to have you call the jerk CEO that has shut down the last 17 reps who have called them. Like, we're not going to go that direction.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of In the Nest with Parakeet, episode number 5. We have an amazing guest today, Chris Cicconi. I'm Cynthia Handel, go-to-market advisor for Parakeet. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I won't lie, I'm a little upset it took you 5 episodes to have me on here, but I'll let it slide since we're both here now.
I know, but this is going to be an amazing one. To be honest, this is our first season, so you are guest number 5 on our first season. So kudos to that, right?
All right, that works. You're back in my good graces, Cynthia.
I love it. I love it, Chris. So I'm really excited. You and I have been following each other on LinkedIn for the past 3 years. You have a very interesting background. You come from athletic therapy. How did you land in the sales world?
Oh boy. You're going way back here. So when I was in school, I had this whole thought process of like, I'm going to go to med school. I'm going to become a doctor. I don't know. You know, when you're like 4 years old and you're either going to be like a doctor, a firefighter, or like a police officer, those are the only options. That was the direction and it never really changed. And then I got to school and I was like, well, studying to be a doctor is hard. Maybe I can do something else instead. So athletic therapy was kind of the crossover between health and sport, which were two things that interested me. I didn't exactly do my market research before getting into it. So when it came time to start doing, luckily enough, I did internships with my education, and there just aren't very many professional sports teams in Canada. Like I'm literally wearing a hat of a team that doesn't exist anymore. So I came to the quick realization that finding a job might be a little bit more challenging than I'd like it to be. And so I thought to myself, what else can I do? I had spent my time up until that point in retail sales, working at principally like a sports athletic store. And so I thought, well, hey, maybe I can take that and turn that into a career. I hear salespeople get paid okay. So that was kind of what made me decide to make the pivot and start searching for my first sales role, really. I've been doing this for 15 years since that story of let me try and figure out what the heck I want to do with my life. I spent the first 10 years selling services, essentially staffing services specifically. Started as a recruiter, individual contributor, sales leader, division leader, did that whole thing and had done that for, like I said, about 10 years, saw a bunch of success, was really happy with that. But whenever it was kind of, I was looking at what my career progression would be, it was always like in the staffing space and there was no real flexibility there. So I wanted to make a little bit of a move and a pivot. And I ended up moving into the SaaS world at HRWise. So sold an HRIS technology there, was the first sales hire, got to build something up. And that's where I fell in love with building something and starting something new. So kind of living in that early stage startup founder world. So went from there to focusing on the outbound side of things. So I was an SDR leader after that at Visier, moved over to Replicant to do the same thing. And then left there and had a really, really bad experience that I won't dive too much into. But when you're playing in the founder world, sometimes founders are less than transparent about the amount of money they have. So I moved over to another startup as the head of sales and business development. That lasted a couple of months before I stopped getting a paycheck. But if I'm not going to get paid, I might as well start my own business and not get paid, right? That was the perfect opportunity to pivot and say, I can do this myself. And that's where I kind of took all that love of building and developing and started saying, well, hey, what if I did that fractionally instead of, jumping around from company to company every couple of years, building something and then going, this is cool. Let me go do it somewhere else. It was, let me do it for myself. So I started fractionally doing some, outsourced, pseudo outsourced BDR type of work, helping companies set up cold email cadences, their domains, all that good stuff. Worked with a lot of founders to help transition from the founder led sales space to more of a traditional sales led space because I was the first sales hire a few times and I know how challenging that can be. So right now, that's really my main focus is, working with founders and early stage startups and helping them sort of take their sales to the next level, whether that is a little bit of infrastructure or training and development when it comes to the founder themselves in the founder-led sales motion, or whether that's helping them transition and start to bring on a team and start to build that out so they can scale their business while they can focus on, working on whatever it is, that product that they're trying to deliver.
It's super interesting because you and I both have had worked for staffing companies. So I think that also helps us like be better sales leaders when it comes to hiring, just
Oh,
because we
for
already
sure.
worked in staffing. We know who's going to be more successful than who. What key lessons did you learn in the staffing industry that help you like today, like hiring SDR and BDR teams?
So working in the staffing industry and at Aerotech specifically gave me such an interesting perspective on like hiring as a whole because the only reason I got an opportunity there was because their whole mantra was to hire people who had the right personality traits, right? They were driven, they were resilient, they were curious, they had all that going for them. Work experience was less relevant. Education, less relevant. Like, cool, you have a university degree. That means you applied yourself and got something out of it. That's nice. It means you can, put the work in. So that mentality is something that I continue to do throughout my time there. And since then, that's why I love the SDR role so much. Let's go take somebody who's driven, who's excited, who's got that fire, and let's put them in the direction of, hey, you can build a real career out of this. That's why for me, like in something we started building at Visier and we really followed through it at Replicant is how do I develop an SDR from nothing to promotion to AE, or we've promoted them to recruiter, we've promoted SDRs to marketing roles. Like, how do you get them to that next step? And that's really, really important for me because hiring SDRs, like, they become such an amazing talent pool internally. So, really, the thing I learned in the staffing world is like, you can, if you find the right people, you can train and develop them to pretty much do anything, especially in the sales world where the roles itself, like, don't get me wrong, sales is incredibly challenging, but a lot of times it's more mentally challenging than task challenging, right? The individual tasks of the job itself aren't as difficult as it is to work your way through that as a human being. And that's where a lot of those mentality and the those characteristics carry so much more importance than, hey, I've got sales experience somewhere else.
There's definitely a path. Like if you want to be a closer, if you want to be an SDR manager, if you want to go into marketing. And I think one of the biggest things people make mistakes when hiring and just thinking about it, it's better to be easier to work with and have the great attitude than just being great at your job, right? Somebody that has the energy, the attitude, the grit, they're just willing to do more is going to get them farther in life and be more visible to leadership than just somebody who's actually good at their job but is difficult to work with, doesn't go the extra mile, like they clock in and clock out every day. Like if you ask them for something that is out of their scope of work, they're going to be like, no, sorry, I don't do that. So it's just having that hungry, stay humble mentality all of the time. And I just think that SDRs, I love working with SDRs and BDRs. It's like I love building teams. It's a lot of work, but it's also very rewarding just to see these individuals grow their career, and like they're so grateful with you as well. Like these are friends that you're gonna have for life. So I love that. What's your hiring mantra for SDRs? Like must haves versus nice haves.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the nice to haves because I have one in there that I've come to develop over time that I kind of feel like I'm saying it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I like when the SDR has had previous professional work experience. And I like to explain it this way. I am really great at training and developing people. I don't want to have to teach you how to like tie your shoes though, because I've literally been in that world, again, pre-remote, pre-SaaS space, but you hire somebody brand new out of university, out of
College and
school,
like they've
whatever.
never had a job, anything but athletics or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like you have some of them, don't get me wrong, that have the right friends, the right parents, the right whoever. They show up and they're prim and proper and know how to, get into things. And then you have others who show up and like literally don't know how to tie their shoes, or like I had a dude show up with no shoelaces one day. Is just some strange stuff. But like that's why for me, from a nice to have perspective, if you can come in and just like have had a professional work experience somewhere, it doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be a lot, but like you get the business world, an internship is fine. Just like having a little bit of that, hey, I get how to conduct myself in a professional environment. Like that for me, I find it helpful, not a must have, a very nice to have. But for me, that's what I look at from a nice to have
I don't
perspective.
think that's being a I think
Okay.
it's just what everybody looks for. Like any job, like maybe you were an assistant to a coach and you did some spreadsheet work. So you know how to be early to your job every day. You know that you have to be like work ethic, like just the basic, like any entry level role. I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, and then from a must-have perspective, I think it's the typical stuff we're looking at in most sales roles, right? Like you have to be curious. Every time I answer a question, I think of like LinkedIn posts that you see people go, "Oh, well, they have to be curious. If they're not asking questions during the job interview, then like they're out." And all I can think about is all the comments flaming that person on their post. But if you think about it, especially for a junior role, I have so little to base my decision on. So having somebody go and ask questions, legitimate questions, because they were actually curious about the job, about me, about their training, about the objectives, about the goals, all that carries so much weight when you're trying to get that first role. Same thing with grit. Like you have to be resilient. If you can tell me a story about times where you've kind of overcome the odds, or you've picked yourself back up and dusted yourself off to move forward and drive for whatever success or results, like that's huge as well. If you can tell me about a time where you've worked with other peers, it could be a school project even, and work through some kinks, because especially as SDRs, you've got to work with your AE sometimes. You've got to work with like the SDR leader. You've got to touch base with marketing. You've got to understand the product. Like you have to work with a lot of different people. And let's be fair, a lot of times the SDRs come in and people aren't lining up to spend time chatting with them, right? They're like, you're the new guy and you probably won't last very long. So like go over there and talk to me once you've been here for like 6 months. So it's like, how do you navigate tough situations internally to be able to gather the information you need to really be able to exceed in your role?
I love that. I love that. And I think also one of the biggest ones is just be coachable.
Yes.
Like the ones fresh out of college or they have had one or two experiences, they're a lot more moldable and easier to coach than any seasoned sales rep. Like they have their own system, and if you're coming into an SDR role, the biggest thing about the SDR role, even if you have experience, is also being moldable and coachable. Like if
Mhm.
you're not open to being coached and taking that feedback and implement it to your day to day, you won't be successful. You might have all of the sales experience in the world, but if you're not coachable, it won't work out. And I've seen it happen with top performers. They take on a new job, they fail and crash and burn up the new job because they came with a system from their old job. They're used to their ways and they're not open to being coached or changing things that are going to work for this new company.
Yeah, when new hires show up and the first line out of their mouths is, "This is how we did it at my last job," like that is just a huge red flag, because don't get me wrong, it could work. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but to your point, Cynthia, it makes it seem like, well, this is how I used to do it. This works for me. So I'm going to show up here. I'm just going to copy and paste that. Leave me alone. Let me do my thing. And that is not going to lead to success. And in an SDR role, or really in any role, and I say that as having done this for a while and being old and grumpy and set in my ways as well. I have to make a mental note to be coachable, especially working with different founders and different industries and different companies. Each one is a little bit different, and you have to be able to learn how to merge your expertise and your experience with what these people are telling you to make sure that aligns.
When you're training new SDRs, how do you cultivate like confidence, keep that flame alive with the SDRs?
A lot of momentum, a lot of small victories, and a lot of support. So every time I did anything SDR related, I always made sure that the new hire had a senior SDR buddy that they would, spend a couple minutes with every day at the very least. And again, it's just about cultivating those little wins. Like, hey, what did you do today? What did you learn? Cool. Like, let's reinforce the fact that, yeah, you got that. That's great. That's amazing. Then it becomes, hey, let's practice that. Let's quiz you a bit on it. Let's do some role plays. And again, you're just kind of trying to build that momentum. You're layering things on top. And a lot of sales is repetition, right? The SDR role is repetition. We're not going to have you call the jerk CEO that has shut down the last 17 reps who have called them. Like, we're not going to go that direction. Maybe we go a direction where, we've had some momentum, or, we've worked with them in the past. Like, let's get you having conversations. And then you start to feel good about, hey, I had a really nice conversation with that person. They listened to me. They heard me out. I felt pretty confident going into it. Now you make things a little bit harder and you keep going that way. And I'm talking about this like it's some crazy elaborate program, but like that can happen in the span of 1 to 2 weeks where you get everything in, you get conversations flowing, and you get the ball rolling. And I think that's the biggest thing is you just have to get into it. Protecting them too much can lead to them feeling confident, and then you put them on the phones and then they get hit in the face, and then all of a sudden that all crumbles and you spend 2 weeks doing nothing. Like, give them a little bit of confidence, give them a little momentum, and then get them into the role so they can start learning and doing it in the real world, because nothing replaces that. And as an SDR, the beauty of the role is there's so little damage you can actually do. Like, putting you out there, you're going to cold call somebody, they're going to hang up on you. You could call them back 3 minutes later, they wouldn't remember you. So who cares?
Exactly. They get so many calls, and like I agree with the low hanging fruit, and I love that. That's actually a good idea because you could give them old inbound leads that never converted, which is going to give them a bigger possibility of having a conversation, even if they don't convert, but just have a
Mhm.
conversation, which will, I love that. I love that. I'm also adding that to my to do things. I'm onboarding 3 new SDRs, so I love that. That's a
There you
great
go.
idea.
Because like that's such an important point, right? It's not even about booking the meeting. Great, booking the meeting feels amazing, don't get me wrong, but if you can actually get somebody on the phone and have a nice conversation with them because they're the right ICP, they're in the right space, at one point they actually needed what you're doing, like, you can have a productive conversation there, you get a lot out of it, and then you feel good about it. And so, like, I think just that is important because having those conversations is such a big change from like, hey, I dialed 50 times today and not a single person picked up, and now I want to jump off a bridge. Right. So, like, just having those conversations is so valuable.
I love that. And as you know, Parakeet is a cold email tool. And I did my research on you. You talk about your Walking Dead play
Mm.
for redirecting close lost deals. And that was super, super interesting to me, which drives like a 40% reply rate. Can you walk us through how that works? Just because we have a ton of people on our cold email community asking for cold email tips, and we believe that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, let's be clear. They say 40%, or I said 40%. That's not 40% positive. That's just 40% replies.
Reply rate in general, like good or bad. No, no,
I
no. I
know.
get that. Yeah.
The Walking Dead is a concept I actually learned at a replicant, and it's nothing overly complex, right? It's a closed lost process of going back through, and we would have it set to a cadence of essentially every 3 months. The first one could be a little bit sooner depending on when a decision was made or exactly what happened, but usually we'd hit them up for 3 months for the span of about 9 months worth, so like 3 times over, just to try and re-engage them. So it would be like, hey, I'm reaching out to Cynthia. I or we or somebody at the organization, or put insert name here, was talking to insert other person's name about XYZ for this company. It would have like a couple pain points and one solution we offer for it. So it was really templatized as to what we were offering. The beauty of it was these were all people we engaged with in the past and they had all spoken to us in the past. So we were getting a lot of replies, even if they were just saying, no, not interested, or we went in this direction, or we really like this. So that was all really great knowledge for us to understand who's winning in the market if it's not us. Why are they? Can we still get a conversation going with this company even if they're never going to do it? And the piece I added to it that I thought turned out to be quite valuable was we were typically going after the people we spoke with, right? We had a meeting with 3 people. Let's reach out to 3 people and engage with them. Cool. But what about other people at that organization? Those folks, if they're in our ICP, are likely also had been experiencing the same types of challenges that these people were facing, right? At some point, the company was shopping for what we were offering. there's got to be a reason for it, and it might extend past just the points of contact we had. And what we started to see was in some scenarios they're like, yeah, totally, Chris, we were looking at this, it's that guy you were talking to, go back and bug that person. And you're like, cool, no problem. But we were finding a lot of times, oh yeah, I have that problem. We were never actually aware that we were shopping around for that. That would actually be really valuable. We still haven't solved that problem. So I was like, oh, okay. Turns out companies don't communicate well internally. Shocker, I know. But that piece was super interesting because it got us into different departments and different angles and different ways of going about getting in front of the decision makers. So, like, replicants are great.
Multi-threading, like how to talk, how what is interesting to a CRO is not what is interesting to a CMO. I love that.
Absolutely. And the thing was, we didn't necessarily have the right talk track or the right messaging for that other person. So if we had just sent them our typical cold email outreach, it might not have resonated with them. But because we had gotten that information from the company already, we knew what their pain points were or what some of their challenges were because they straight up told us. So that automatically makes that email super relevant. So obviously you're looking at contact center leaders and things like that. You're going to talk about how you can make their process more efficient. But then it was, well, wait a second. Workforce planning is trying to plan for peaks and valleys of calls, right? So seasonal, you're working for a travel agency or an airline. Well, March break gets super busy. How do I plan for that? Oh, well, wait, if I had an automated AI tool that could help better navigate some of those calls, well, that would be efficient. So, like, now we're talking to workforce management. Now we're talking to the training department. Now we're talking to the HR department that handles the contact center because if they can better control the volume of calls they get less burnout. So, all kinds of new sort of ideas come to mind when you're able to get in front of different people. And you do that by having the relevant information for that company, and you're not just looking at general trends across the industry, which is what at least my cold emails typically represent.
In this world of chat GPT and AI, like when writing cold outreach, how do you balance personalization with relevance? Because like as we know, like every time you see a dash, we now understand it's chat GPT, it's written by AI. But I think 2024 was the year where everybody kept saying personalized, personalized, and personalization got cringy, right? Like it got to a point where it's like, hey, Chris, I see you're in Canada and that you follow. And it's like, you are automatically know that's written by LinkedIn. So, how do you personalize your cold emails? Do you use any LinkedIn signals? How do you stand out and like not? And if you're using AI, how do you keep that relevant?
So, my belief in the cold email world, I'll say specifically, I don't personalize anything ever. Really. Like, don't get me wrong, there are some exceptions, right? If you went to a conference or something and you bumped into the person, you might leave room to personalize a couple little notes. If it's a closed loss, we have more data, so we can personalize that a little bit. But generally speaking, I lean very heavily on relevance. And what I will typically do is I will niche down as deep as humanly possible. So a lot of times you'll group companies by industry. Well, can we go to sub industry? Can we go to sub industry? Like, how nitty gritty can we get so that everything we say is super pointed? And like going back to the replicant example, like we had a transportation vertical essentially. And you're like, that's cool, except airlines and trains and public transit all have different problems. So like let's get really deep into airlines. We have an airline client. Let's talk to them about what their challenges are. Let's gather all those case studies. Let's gather all that information. Let's learn the language that they speak. So that first email reads as though I live in your world. And you're dropping acronyms that they use regularly. You're dropping some of the challenges that they are feeling regularly. And then you're able to support that with somebody in your exact role at one of your competitors literally had this challenge and now they're doing this. We solved that problem. So for me, the way to do it, at least in my belief, because it is less work, it is not AI generated, it is just let's get really, really specific with what we're trying to do and who we're talking to so it can all be as relevant as possible.
I do the same as you, by the way. I only put
Right?
company name, first name, or last name if there is any, and then I'm hyper relevant. What's relevant to them is the only thing that matters. All they care is how they can make money, how this is going to make them grow, and how their patients are going to get better results. Like those are the only things that they care about.
And I think you nailed it as well because you talked about the different things that are important to them. And I think we always go with business results must be important, right? People want to make more money, but then you realize you're reaching out to people leaders. Well, sometimes the people leaders, don't get me wrong, they want their company to be successful. They want to look good, sure, but they want their people to be successful. So if I'm selling a tool that's going to help you help your people, let's talk about that. Let's not talk about dollar value. Let's talk about how that's going to make your employees happier. Let's talk
Exactly.
about how it's going to make it more relevant to them. So, like, just like you said, sure, making more money is great, but if you're talking about better patient outcomes, well, better patient outcomes are going to return more money anyway. I go back to the contact center examples because it's easy for everybody to understand because everybody's called a contact center at one point. But like if you're talking to an agent and that agent is happy because they have a lower workload, they're more satisfied in their job, their job is more interesting now because of the types of calls they're getting, they're going to offer you a better service. If they offer you a better service, you are more likely to be retained, you're more likely to buy again, you're more likely to share better word of mouth. So it's not just saying like, hey, we're going to make you more money. It's we're going to help your people be better at their job. That will make them happier. That will then make your customers happier. That will then make them like it all comes back around. But a call center manager doesn't care that the company's going to make another $1 million this year. They care that their people are happier. They attrit less. I have to train new people less. Like that makes me happy in my role. And then we all win. So like I think that's the other thing is like it's not just understanding the industry, the company, what their goals are. It's understanding who you are reaching out to and why is it relevant for that specific person. And again, if I have to take my cadence and go, okay, I have an airline one. Okay, well, I have an airline one specifically for managers. I have an airline one specifically for VPs. I have an airline one specifically for the HR folks that are taking care of the contact center. Like, great, let's have 6 different cadences in airlines, and let's only put people who are perfect matches for that in there because that is going to make every one of those emails more efficient and effective.
I love that. And by the way, Chris Cicconi question in fact, what would you say is your highest converting channel? Like when you're getting their like emails, cold calls, or LinkedIn?
Me personally, I mean, I would say LinkedIn, but again, that's also I am very much on the personalized side of things. So it's very rare I will send a LinkedIn message. I will almost always do a LinkedIn video. And I will very often get a response, even if the response is just, hey, I don't get a lot of videos. That's cool. That's new. That's different. Right. And so you're opening a conversation. And I think that's the other piece that is interesting for me on LinkedIn is it's not as direct conversion, right? A cold call is like, I pick up the phone, you answer, I convert you now. An email might be 2 or 3 in a sequence that are telling a story that engage people. LinkedIn is like, hey, can we just chat? Can I learn more about you? Hey, I saw this, that was cool. So it's a different type of conversation. So it converts, it just takes longer. And we live in a world where most people have very little patience. So when they want results, they don't want to wait a little bit. They want results now. So they want you to make 1,000 calls and send 8,000 emails.
Yeah, and I think now with the changes that Apple's implementing, that it will have its own AI agent, which will basically just convert who's live to text, and you decide if you want to let that call pass through. That's where relevancy and trust will also come into place because it's already happening. Like cold calls are reply rates have fallen. It's getting harder for reps every single day, and it's all about being relevant and creating trust, right? Specifically with cold calling, like July is going to be a big month on people seeing how reply rates drop.
And I think that it's such a great way to look at everything you do as a whole. I don't think any specific channel exists on its own. I mean, they do. And we've seen cold email work with no support. We've seen cold calls work, like we've seen LinkedIn work all on their own islands. But I think they work best when you can complement them. If I'm cold calling and I get hit with Apple's AI screening bot, and I can say, hey, I sent you an email regarding this and this, like that suddenly becomes a, oh, was I supposed to see that email? What's that email about? Hold on a second. Let me check in on that. Or hey, I sent you a video on LinkedIn, or you're doing vice versa. You're mixing and matching and trying to direct people from different places to different places. And that's where I think Storytelling is going to become so much more important because it's how do you tell a story across multiple different channels in multiple different steps that builds on each other and isn't constantly repetitive, just punching your prospect in the face with the same stuff, because that just becomes noise and they're going to end up ignoring it.
No, I agree with you. Like, I don't believe in a all in all nest eggs all in one nest approach, or eggs all in one basket, however you want to say it. Just because I think email, LinkedIn, and cold calling like really complement each other, and they're just part of an entire demand gen, or I would say sales strategy to get your meetings to convert. But I've seen it, like companies that only do emails as a solo channel, eventually it stops working, it breaks, they have to go down to domains, then they decide to hire BDR teams again. So it's basically a burn and churn, and it's all part of a strategy. Like, every channel is good, but I think it's all part of a bigger strategy. I don't believe in like doing only one channel and just building results on that channel. If anybody's selling you that, you really have to be careful. And it also depends on your industry, right? Like, some
Yep.
people are more likely to pick up the phone, some people are more likely to respond to an email, and some people are more likely to respond to a LinkedIn message. It's just that it's all part of a bigger strategy. We're booking via cold call, we're booking via cold email, and we're also getting in leads via LinkedIn. So you
And I
never know.
think I think you nailed it there too, because you have to look at the different approaches across the different channels because you're also going to hit a different target. The folks who are active on LinkedIn likely have different priorities, different mindset. They're on LinkedIn for a reason. So are you approaching them for the reason they are there? The ones who will take a cold call, well, great. Why are they taking that cold call? There's probably a reason as to why they're more comfortable on the phone. Same thing with email. People reply in different ways through different modalities for different reasons. So if you can figure out the why to that channel, like that's very, very powerful. It's the same thing. Somebody sends me a voice note. I hate voice notes. I hate
Same.
them so much.
I never listened to them.
I right. It's because I'm usually in the middle of something else and I would have to stop and listen to that voice note. But the caveat is that's really powerful because I can't multitask while I do that. So I'm giving somebody their full attention if I stop and listen. So is that good to targeting me? Absolutely not. Video works great for me because I'm a big video nerd and I like doing videos and stuff. So like I'll probably stop to watch it because I'm curious.
As a fractional like sales leader, you juggle multiple clients. What's your top tip like for managing outreach across all of them? Because you're also doing LinkedIn outreach for your clients as well. How do you manage like your brand with that?
Let me preface this with my whole concept is I don't want to work with companies forever. I don't want to be a crutch. I don't want people to think of me as like, oh, this is the outsourced guy. He'll close this business or he'll generate meetings for us forever. If I have to do this with a company for like a year, I'm probably just going to get bored and not be effective. So I want to set up structure so that I can hand this off to you as a playbook and then you can run it. You can hire people to run it, do whatever you want. So like when it comes to calls and emails, I don't want to own the tools in like an agency mode where I can run multiple different companies through the same tool. Like, no, we're going to get you your tool. You're going to have access for it to it. You're going to pay for it. We're going to set all your stuff up in there. Same thing for calls, same thing for emails, all of that. It all belongs to you, all that. For LinkedIn, it is a bit different because when I'm generating, opportunities through LinkedIn, I do it myself, but that's why I'm also typically pretty good on anything that I'm doing on LinkedIn will be on my LinkedIn profile. So they're going to see that like, oh yeah, Chris is fractional at this company or that company. So from that perspective, to be fair, I could probably be a bit more organized because it is a lot to juggle specifically on LinkedIn with outreach. Because it's like, who am I reaching out to for what? They're all different personas that I'm targeting. I make sure not to overlap them. So I have an idea of like somebody in HR versus somebody in education adds me on LinkedIn. Like I know what I was doing with them. But that's the one channel that's not super clear to me in the way of how I can really separate that from um, like from one client to another. But I also think that's a big part of LinkedIn and how it is. Like it shouldn't be separated by company. It's my brand, it's my page, it's me. So like it encompasses everything I do.
And I think you said something super important. It's like it's your brand, it's your LinkedIn. So you're not hitting people with generic like copy pitches, you're creating your own, like be that a video, a personalized video, or something that's relevant to them. And that's something that people need to understand, I think, in fractional roles. Like it's okay as long as you have it that you're an advisor for XYZ company, that you're gonna be reaching out to them. People can have multiple associations.
Of course. Of course. And I think it's so interesting on two counts. First of all, I was chatting with somebody who's an expert in branding, and as I was starting my company, I'm like, what should I call it? Like, do I need a logo, a web page, all that? And they're like, dude, you have a brand. Why would you name it anything other than your name? Just like make it clear that it is you and you're doing this and it's only you. You don't plan on hiring people. It's like you don't need it to be a company. You need it to be you. Like I literally named my company Chris Cicconi Inc. Like that's how creative I got. But still, like that's a big part of it, right? It's who you are and you've put time and effort into your brand. Why would you go name it something else or detract from that? Again, unless you're planning on growing it, hiring, and it'd be weird if it was just your face. But like for me, that was such a big part of it of just you get what you get me, and that is what it is.
So what do you think is the biggest myth in outbound sales that needs killing?
That anything is dead. Nothing is dead. Nothing is ever dead. Nothing has ever been dead. I don't want to say nothing will ever be dead because like fax machines are kind of on the edge of being dead. But to be fair, last time I worked in an office, which granted is about 5 years ago, we still got cold faxes from people. Nothing is dead depending on who you're working with and who you're talking to. And you've got everything from snail mail to direct mail gifting to emails to LinkedIn to conferences and trade shows. There's so much of it and it all ebbs and flows, right? You had the pandemic happen and all of a sudden trade shows aren't a thing for a little bit. You've got some places
In-person meetings, in-person trade. Now it's all back to
networking.
in-person, right? Everybody is going back to the office slowly.
And now you also have, instead of like the big trade shows and stuff, you have smaller networking events that you need to be able to maximize, right? So let me go get a small group of people together. Creativity is part of the fun of the SDR and outbound role because, to your point earlier, it is boring otherwise. But if you can mix it up with, we always make sure to send an SDR to an event so
We
they've
do
got a
the
chance to rotate
same. Oh
through.
my
Like,
God. I love that you and I have identified in so many things because we're rotating our SDRs
yep.
just to keep it exciting. Like, yes, your job will be boring. You will be on the phone, but you will also get to attend one event per month. You will be on rotation. You will get to talk to people in person, and that will be exciting.
The amount that an SDR will learn, even if they book nothing and they go to an event, the amount that they will learn in that time period, just talking to people, is a year's worth of conversations on the phone during cold calls, right? Like just the amount of conversations you have and the openness people have to talking to you because you're there, you're networking, you're having fun. Like those things are so important. And that's why like there are just so many avenues to take that don't say anything is dead. It might not be working for you right now
True.
for
I hate it
XYZ
when I
reason.
say email is dead, cold calling is dead, or everybody saying it's the death of cold calling as we know it with the new, like, no, it's Google
Oof.
has had their AI assistant for over 3 years now, and everybody's it still works.
And I've heard it like twice. I honestly have very rarely gotten it, and I haven't figured out how to get through it. So that's probably something I'll have to spend a bit more time on with the Apple rolling theirs out too. But it was such an infrequent thing that you're kind of like, is it even worth me figuring it out? Like, let me just hang up and try again later. You
Yeah,
know?
and some people won't even have it on their phone just because it will get annoying after a while having everybody call them and saying I'm being sent to your assistant and they miss out important things, but it's just going to be super annoying.
That's actually a really good point too, because it was funny. I was chatting with some people about like how Google's had it forever, and they're like, "Yeah, but it's optional for Google. Apple's going to make it mandatory, or like auto on, like it's going to be on." I'm like, "Yeah," and it's also supposed to target anybody whose number isn't in your phone, like your doctor, your
What if it's
contractors
your kid
renovating your
calling from
house,
school and it's an emergency? Exactly.
your school, a public phone, if those still exist because like the kid has a quarter at school. I don't know. Like there's so many scenarios where that's going to happen to somebody once where their kid calls because it's an emergency and it goes to their voice assistant and that thing is getting turned off immediately. So I think everything gets overblown and everybody wants to talk about it. And LinkedIn is about clicks and engagement. So everybody has to bring up the hot topic. But yeah, nothing is dead. Nothing will be dead. And cold calling is not going anywhere.
I believe that as well. And what do you think is the most unconventional outreach tactic you've ever tried? And did it work?
Ooh, my favorite to this day outreach tactic. It's actually funny because it wasn't even really cold. It was cold, but big client when I was working in staffing. They were huge. They were used to process checks. So they would get all the ATM checks, and then they'd have somebody have to punch them in and validate them and blah, blah, blah. So they had like a huge need for people. And I got a hold of the operations manager of the location. He's like, yeah, we use other agencies. We love extra support, whatever. But the HR person is the one who absolutely makes that decision. Great, no problem. Can you introduce me? Oh, yeah, well, she works during the day and he worked evening nights. So it's like, it's hard to introduce you because we never really cross paths. But like, I'll send an email introducing you, whatever. She never responded. Here's her phone number. Never answered, nothing. And I was like, this is a huge account. I need to get in front of her. So I took, at the time, like one of those cheap prepaid cell phones, like you can find it, I don't know, Walmart. And it was, I don't know, $50 maybe or something. You like add in enough time for one conversation. So I added like 10 minutes of talk time, put in a box, mailed it to her, landed on her desk with a note basically saying, hey, I've been having a hard time getting a hold of you. I'm going to call you I'm going to call this phone at 1:00 on Tuesday or whatever it was, right? I've never had my heart beat harder in my chest that moment of making that call to think that like this $50 phone might just go to waste. Picked up the phone, made the call, dialed the phone, no answer. I was heartbroken. And then a couple hours later, I actually got an email from her saying, I got your phone, very clever. I was unfortunately in a meeting at the time and couldn't pick up the phone, but why don't you come down and talk to me? And we set up time and actually met. So it worked. Not exactly the way I had planned, but it had worked. And
It worked. You did get a reply back, the email that you were expecting. As a final note, what advice do you want to say to everybody that's just getting started on like building their brand on LinkedIn and also doing fractional sales? Because I think that's going to grow. Like it's the new norm, right? Like people have, even I'm an advisor for multiple companies as well as you. We're doing multiple things. We have our day jobs, but we're also advising companies out there. What is the one advice or one tip that you would give out to anybody who wants to be in roles similar or in positions like you and me?
So I'm going to actually combine the two kind of questions because you asked about the LinkedIn brand building and then you asked about this stuff. And I think that the biggest piece, first of all, is building a brand helps open so many of these doors for multiple reasons, right? People know who you are and recognize you. That's already beneficial if you're considering fractional sales. Like every one of my fractional clients, I have gotten through LinkedIn. Not necessarily warm, like I've cold outreached and things like that, but it helps when you're like, hey, you look credible, you talk about sales stuff, all that is absolutely valuable. The other thing is you network, you meet people like you, Cynthia. Like I think to actually, I did a podcast earlier this week talking about brand partnerships. I was like, yeah, we've both had brand partnerships. We'll go back and forth in the DMs being like, hey, do you work with them? Do you work with
Did you
them? Are
get
they good
paid?
to work with? Did you get paid? Right? Like I think of that. Or like, hey, I'm having a hard time with them. Are you having a hard time with them? And you're like,
I
yeah.
remember that one. Yeah.
So like that's a great way to do it as well. You know, I've had conversations with people doing similar fractional work and they're like, yeah, I have to turn down clients sometimes. Like I am full. I was like, cool. I could use another client or two. So if you have to turn somebody down and would be open to introducing me, like that would be great. So like, I find for me, that's a great way to do it. And having your brand, being able to carry that with you just gives you some instant credibility that you would have to work a little bit harder for if you didn't have that. So that's why I think the brand piece is super valuable. Like follower count and things like that, I'm like whatever, they're not super relevant, but it just shows you're able to share things and you've got it out there. So if somebody wants to learn a bit about me, go to my LinkedIn page, scroll through my last 5 posts, you'll get an idea of who I am and the expertise that I bring to the table. So I think that's why that's valuable. I think it all kind of comes together with the networking piece. You have to get into the circles of people who do fractional work, who are advisors, ask them how they got into it, ask them if they know anybody else who's looking, all that kind of stuff. Because that's the easiest way for me. I haven't cracked the outbound, strategy on that yet. Just for me, networking has been the way to go.
No, same. I think most of the brand sponsorships I get is people who follow me, who see my content, find me on LinkedIn, and just email me.
Yep.
Chris, it has been such a pleasure having you on today.
Been so great chatting with you, face to face, or as close as we'll get, versus
Who
just kind of
knows?
putting
You
on
might be in
LinkedIn.
the States soon and you will visit me in Miami. I'm down in Miami, so excited to have you there.
Perfect. I'll put that on my to-do list. Head down to Miami to see Cynthia.